Hello everyone. Now I am going to talk about VM migrate to container. How we can migrate VM to container based workload. So that I am going to show you. So this is the high level architecture which I have designed, like how the source VM we have defined, and then which tool I will use over here. For example, migrate to container Anthos tool, which I will use to migrate their VM workload to container. So let me talk about a little bit more about the architecture. As you can see in the left hand side, this is my source VM, and the tool which I will use migrate to container, and then finally the help of this migration tool, which I will migrate the VM to container. So this is the architecture, and source could be anywhere, like it could be on-prem, it could be other different cloud, or cloud to cloud. So in this demo, I'll just show cloud to cloud. So now let me go to the next steps, how it will follow the process to migrate the source VM, and what is the prerequisite, all these things I will discuss. So migrate for Anthos, this is the tool which will move VM to container, and here as you can see, migrate for Anthos discovery tool which will initialize and discovery the all the source VM. Then what we'll have to do in our target environment? So in target environment we have to create a processing cluster, I mean GKE cluster. Then the next things, the command line will use the mixctl tool, which will be process the whole migration as part of the migration. So mixctl tool will create the environment, how it will automatically migrate the dependency and plugins and what are the required files. It will create and migrate to the target. So mixctl will help us to migrate. So now let me go to the next slide. So here just let me talk about the migrate for Anthos workflow. So in this workflow, what we'll have to do, first of all you need to enable the service account and APIs. This is the first steps, and then once this is done, then we'll go for the deploy the processing cluster. Then next steps, you qualify your workload, and the fourth step, define the migration source. Then all these four steps is done. Then now it will come to generate and review the plan. Once it is done, then we'll go for generate and review the artifact. Once this process is done, then lastly it will deploy the containerized application into the target. So this is all about the workflow migrate for container VM migrate to container workflow. So how it looks like, so it will be more the scenario which workflow will follow. This is the whole process which will follow to as part of the whole migration. So now I hope you understood the workflow process of the VM migration to container. Now let me talk about the prerequisite. So first of all, you need to create two service account. So one service account, the access container registry and cloud storage admin role, and the second one is the enable compute engine as a migration source. And what are the role you need to define? So compute engine viewer, compute storage admin rule, and all what all are API need to enables. So let me talk about a little bit more about that. First you need to enable service management, service control API, Cloud Resource Manager API, Compute Engine API, Kubernetes Engines API, and Google Container Registry API. Lastly, you have to enable the Cloud Build API. Now let me go ahead to show the demo. uh, so now it's a demo part, so how the whole process will follow as part of the migration of VM to container. So I'll show you step by steps. So now I'm going to show the demo. So as you can see, this is my source VM, and the source VM output, let me show you what is the output which we can show. The same we, after migration, same we can show in the container based workload. So this is my output, like when I'll show the will use the application. So my website should be, the content should be like this. For example, this is the demo point of view. I have taken some few content. So hello everyone, follow this migration demo, how we can migrate VM workload to GKE container based workload. So this should be my content which I will migrate once I migration completed. So I'll validate with this particular content. So what we'll have to do when we'll start the migration process, so at least the source VM, you need to stop that VM, right? So the source, based on this architecture diagram. So and then now I'm going to talk about the process. So source VM is already ready, then when we are going to follow the migration process. So before going to start the migration process, you need to stop the source VM, right? So let me stop that. Okay, now it's stop the VM. It will stop. And let me go to open the migration to container Anthos tool. Migration to container. This is the tool which will, as part of this migration, will use that. Okay, so let me explain a little bit more about the process in this tool. What the process we need to follow. First, we need to create the processing cluster. Once our processing cluster is created, then we'll define the source. What is our source? Where we know where we want to migrate. Then lastly, we create the migration job. We'll have to create a migration. So let's go ahead and do the steps. The three process we need to complete one by one. So first we need to create a processing cluster. Okay, so let me go ahead and create a processing cluster. So it will take some time to create a cluster. Now as I can see that the migration of processing cluster GKE cluster already created. So now let me go ahead and create a service account, already created. And now let me go to create the service account. So service account created. Now let me go to provide the storage admin role to the particular service account which I created now. And the rule required rule assigned to the particular service account. Now let me download the service key, account key, and the service account key already created. So now let me authenticate the cluster. So I will do that. So in the three dot, I just click over here and then click on connect, and copy this command line access code and execute in Cloud Shell. So it will authenticate. Yes, now cluster authenticated. So now let me go ahead next process. The next process will install the mixctl. So that is required our service key, which will help us to set up the mixctl. So let me do that. So this mixctl setup will help us to throw out the migration process. So it will applying the source to the cluster, then uh, the required uh, file will create to help for the migration. As you can see, couple of things will created that will help on the backend how we can migrate our source VM to container. So it will take some time. Yeah, but it will not much time to complete. So it will complete soon. Then we'll once completed, we'll just check whether it is completed deployment, Docker artifact, all these things or not. So these are the things which will which will be ready for the deployment. So in the deployment file, Docker registry, artifact, all are the file it's generating on the backend, right? So after this, I'll check through the command line mixctl doctor. It will help us to check. Once it everything is green, then we'll go for the next steps. Here in our migration tool, we'll also will check our processing cluster is uh, created or not. You can see over here. As you can see, migration processing cluster is already ready. Now I will check as part of this process already deployment and Docker artifact all are ready or not. So what's the command? I'll check through this command mixctl doctor. If everything is checked and green mark, then we'll go ahead for the next steps. Now still it is in progress. As you can see, still it is in progress. So let me rerun to check. Artifact repository is ready, Docker registry is ready. Only the in deployment couple of things is pending in progress, so it will complete. Once completed, then we'll go for the next step to create the service account of the migrating the VM service account. Now everything is green checked apart from source status. So now the next step to ready with the source status. So what I'll have to do, I'll have to create the service account for the compute engine. So let me create the service account, one more service account as part of my PPT, which I have already explained. Two service account is required. So based on that, now one service, second service account now created. Let me provide the appropriate rule to play the migration. The compute viewer rule, provided the compute viewer rule, and also I have to provide the compute storage admin rule. Let me do that. Yes, that is done. Now let me download the key which will help us to create the source. uh, yes, source key JSON created. So now I'll create a migration source. Now let me here, as you can see, so the migration source once created, it will display over here, right? So let me go ahead and create that one as well. So let me create the migration source VM. So when we are going to create a migration source VM, so at that moment the service account is required. So that's why we had created the service account for compute engine service account. Now the source was created successfully. Now let me go to check and create the migration. But before going to create the migration, let me quickly check in the tool source is already created or not. So as you can see, my source VM is already created. The second step already we completed. The first step and second step already done. Now the last steps, which will have to create the migration, create migration. So now let's go ahead and create a migration. So how will create? So through to mixetl migration, create my migration, and source, define the source VM, and this is the command line which will help us to create a migration. So in console also we can able to create, but it's very easy to create quickly. So the migration, create migration is already created. So now let me go ahead and check whether it is created or not. Just to check the status. Once everything is goes well, then it will show the completed. So this is the command mixetl migration status. As you can see, this is running. Status is running, but ultimately it will show the status will uh, completed. Then we'll go for the next steps. So the migration status is running, and quickly check in my migration to container tool whether my migration is created or not. As you can see, my migration is already created. It is in process. So quickly check the status again one more time. Now as you can see, it is completed the uh, migration. So my migration status completed. I mean migration, create a migration job. It is completed. Now let me go at the next step to get the my migration to for the review. So this is the command mixctl migration get my migration. So let me check. So what all are file in my migration main configuration YML file and data configuration YML file. So as you can see on left hand side already fetched that migration file which is created as part of the migration automatically. Then now let me go ahead and create the migrate the VM using the migration plan. So let me do that. So this is the command mixctl migration generate artifacts my migration. So this command will help us to create the generate artifact. Okay, so now let me go ahead and check the status. Here also check the status whether artifact is created successfully or not. It's a now it's a generating the artifact and it is status, as you can see it is running. Once it is completed, so we'll go to the next steps, right? So we'll wait for a while. So once completed, then we'll go for the next steps. Meanwhile I can check the status. Still running. Now let's go at the status of the migration. Once it is completed, then we'll go for the next steps. And as you can see, the status is completed. So now let's go ahead to check the next steps. So we'll check the details file which is created as part of the artifact. We'll check these are the process uh, as part of the artifact already created. A lot of thing on the backend created, so you can verify it, right? So generate artifact, generate container plugin worker, container plugin worker, many things as you can see over here. Okay, so now deploying the migrated workload. So now let me go to deploy. So that how we can deploy, so mixctl migration generate artifact and migration. So this is the command to help us for our deployment. Okay, so in the left hand side you see all these are the deployment file. So it will download and you see all the docker file. This is the docker file created, and deployment YML file also created, right? uh, Deployment specification YML. So most of the thing created as you can see over here, right? So and service config YML. So all these deployment YML file automatically created for the migration. So this is automatically created. We have not put any manual effort to create all the YML file and JSON, right? So this is the ultimate tool which will help us for the VM migration to container, right? So that's why we are using this tool as part of the VM migration to container, right? So deployment specification as I check, Docker file created automatically as I check, and migration YML. as you can see, the migration script YML created automatically, right? And then the block list YML. Uh, so block list YML. These are the file. So these are the migrate workload to the cluster, and the confirm that so this file is already created. So now what will do, so in a small thing we need to do to expose our application after the deployment. So in the deployment specification YML file, we want to expose our based on our YML, we need to expose our application. So this we need to define only the small things, small. Now the service we need to define, the load balancer service we need to define, like app is source VM, and the port we need to define target port and source port, and the type is load balancer. Then we can able to see after the after deployment. So let me save it, say auto saved. Now let me go ahead and deploy. So what is the command to deploy? So this is the command kubectl apply -f deploy the YML file. So let me deploy this YML file. Once deployed, then I think our migration will be done. Just will check and verify. So the created YML file, now only we just use small command kubectl command apply -f and deployment YML file. So it will deploy our application into the target container. So now quickly check after some time. So now the deployment is already in process. So let me click on workload. So in this workload, so our source VM, this one is our source VM. So if it is already ready, so we can go ahead and check. So this is our endpoint IP. So through this endpoint IP, we can check whatever the application which you are able to access through the VM after this migration, whether we are able to access that application or not after the migration. So already migration is done. Now the time to validate the application. So now let's go ahead and check. Super. As you can see the same. Hello everyone. Follow this migration demo. How we can migrate VM workload to GKE container based workload. That migration is successfully done. So now, yeah. So our migration successfully done and also validated. The test or the application which we have created for the demo, the same application we can able to access through the after the migration to the container. So this is super awesome demo, so which will be helpful for your if you are planning to migrate the VM workload to container. I hope this video will be helpful, and thank you very much for watching this demo video how we can migrate VM to container. Thank you.